So, welcome everyone. Hi, my name is Barbara Dillon. I am the co-founder and editor-in-chief of Fanbase Press. For those unfamiliar, we are a GLAAD Media Award-winning and Eisner and Harvey Awards nominated comic book publisher and media outlet. In addition to my work at Fanbase Press, I'm also a board member for the Graphic Medicine International Collective and the Latinx Comic Arts Festival. And today I am joined by a wonderfully talented group of panelists and library professionals to have an informal conversation to highlight and troubleshoot the myriad challenges facing library professionals this year. I want to first extend my immense thanks to all of our featured panelists, whom I will introduce in a moment, for being willing to share their time, their talents, and their insights with us today. And I also want to extend a thank you to all of our attendees for engaging in this conversation. If you do have any questions during this session, please feel free to list them in the chat, and I will pose them to our panelists as time permits. But without further ado, let's go ahead and meet our panelists in no particular order. I have Moni Barrette, who is a comics librarian and director of collection development for LibraryPass, past president for American Library Association's Graphic Novel and Comics Roundtable, and co-founder of the nonprofit Creators Assemble. Moni is a former Eisner Industry Awards judge and has 20 years of experience in all areas of public library frontline work and management. Moni, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited.
We are also joined by Matthew No, who is a lead collection and knowledge management librarian at Harvard Medical School, an instructor for both the University of Kentucky and Library Juice Academy, and a trustee for the Worcester Public Library. He is a former president for the American Library Association's Graphic Novel and Comics Roundtable and the treasurer for the Graphic Medicine International Collective. Matthew contributed a foreword to Fanbase Press's title, Ripple Effects, and while continuing to take on way too many things, that is his comment, not mine, he tries to find time to be kind, do good, and read comics. Matthew, thank you so much for being here. We are also joined by Katharine Kan, who is a librarian and comics specialist at Bay County Public Library in Florida. She is also a graphic novel reviewer, columnist, and the first ever Librarian Eisner Awards judge in 2005. Katharine, thank you so much for being here. And last but certainly not least, we have Jack Phoenix, who is the collection development manager for Cuyahoga Falls Library in Ohio. He is also the author of the book Maximizing the Impact of Comics in Your Library, Graphic Novels, Manga, and More, which earned a starred review from School Library Journal. Jack, thank you so much for being here. We may have one other panelist whom, if they're able to join, we will certainly introduce them and welcome them into the conversation. But let's go ahead and dive into this discussion. So first, I'd like to focus on the overall well-being of library professionals, mentally, physically, emotionally. I'm going to reach out first to Moni, Katharine, and Matthew to talk about professional burnout. What can you tell us about how you would define these issues, how expansive in scope they are for today's library professionals? What does burnout look like right now? Matthew, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Apparently, I should have worn all I ever wear are t-shirts. Funny, funny. But I have a shirt that literally says "Fight Burnout" that a health humanities person occasionally sends to people. He's like, "You're fighting the good fight. Here's the t-shirt," which is kind of hilarious because that's not how you fight burnout, but it's a nice gesture. um, but yeah, so I mean, none of us really ever recovered from the pandemic, I don't think. Like burnout. Most libraries have been taking on too many things for decades, right? And then it all kind of came to a head when we all either got sent home or didn't get sent home and continued to work, on the front line one way or another when the start of COVID. And then everything has just been downhill since kind of it just all keeps adding up. And so there's a sense of like something's got to give eventually going around. And what that thing is really depends on which kind of library you're in, I think. My own experience at Harvard right now is that, it might all just crumble to the ground and break. And, it probably won't, right? But the threat is real. And there's a sense that you can't really do much about it from the ground. You just kind of keep trying to do the good work that you're up to. And so trying to find ways to combat that is a big thing. And I'm sure we'll talk about like helpful things later, but that's that's where I'm sitting right now. And I will say from the trustee hat side of things, right? Worcester Public Library is in an urban downtown setting. Library people probably know where I'm going with this, right? Become the social services hub for everything in existence. There's a lot of there have been assaults on staff in the last year. There's a lot of staff having to break up fights. And there's just not strong support coming from the city side to address the root causes. So we're in this kind of like constant advocacy fight, but we're fighting the good fight.
And of course, we will start to tackle in our conversation efforts being made to ameliorate these concerns and these issues. But first, Moni, Katharine, and Jack as well. Any additional comments that you'd like to make about the professional burnout being faced by library professionals?
Yeah, if I could weigh in, I'm actually in the process of writing a book that is in part, acknowledging burnout and working with a couple of clinicians that study it because it's not well studied in the library profession. Most of the studies I initially found were like in healthcare, which makes sense, of course. But I am in talks with Tana Noonan, who is actually a trauma-informed specialist and works in this field. And she was great because she was able to speak to why like librarians might face it more. And obviously we can give the practical examples, but basically it is the chronic exposure to human need without enough systemic, support. I remember when I was a younger librarian, one of the things that still hurts the most was we were closing and a man came in and had a really bad fever and he was, an unhoused person and he was just begging me, could you just like, I know I'm not allowed to use the phone. I know you're closing. I know people have to go home. You're not allowed to stay here by yourself with me, but can you help me call shelters so that I can get a place to sleep? Because it's pouring rain, which is uncharacteristic in Southern California, and I'm really, really sick. So that's something that like stayed with me in addition to like even pre-COVID, as kind of Matthew was mentioning, I went through a period of time where most days I was calling the police before I even entered the building because of the types of things that were happening in the parking lot while I was walking in. So yeah, it's a situation and kind of burnout as far as how it's defined is just where your body is also chronically in that fight or flight mode, and you become eventually unable to get back out of that. Your nervous system remains in that mode after whatever anxiety inducing thing has passed. And so that is absolutely something, certainly before, but also even more after, COVID, that has continued for too many library workers today.
Yeah, things aren't quite, it's really funny because I work in the panhandle of Florida, which is, and we're not a big city, but we still have the same problems with chronically homeless and others. Um, I will say that our administrator, our director, has been very proactive in working with the staff and giving us backup whenever we have any really tough situations. And in our department manager does everything she can to make sure that we are all doing okay. You know, she's always checking on us, helping us, making sure. And even if one of us is alone on the desk and a situation comes up, all we have to do is hit a button and the others will come out. And so we have backup. We also do a whole lot of training um, on how to handle things in a humane way so that we are not making any of our people who come in feel like they are unwanted and need to get out. We really do our best. So I think that there's really our library, our particular library has been, working hard to try to help us all deal with it so that we're not feeling as stressed and alone. But it's still sometimes rough at the end of the day. You want to just go home and just crash because of everything that you've gone through the whole day. But and I think at some other smaller branches it's probably a lot rougher, but I'm in the main library, so we have more people and the director's right there in the building and other administration as well. So we've always felt that we had backup. And I think that really helps a lot, just knowing that there are other people in charge who are right there, sympathetic to what we're going through and willing to come help us at the drop of a hat. That has helped a lot to prevent really bad burnout.
Yeah. We will definitely single in shortly on the scope creep, how, wearing so many different hats can really aid in causing that burnout. But in sticking with the mental, the physical, emotional toll that it's taking on you, what, if any, actions, in addition to what you mentioned, Katharine and Jack, we'll turn to you for this first, but what, if any, actions are being taken to ameliorate these concerns? And are there any specific organizations or individuals that you feel are really taking the lead in these efforts?
Well, one individual who's raising a lot of awareness, and we all know, please clap, Michael Threets. He's doing a wonderful job of using his social media and using his extensive reach to just let people know that library workers are humans too, and that we are going through it. A lot of working folks are going through it, but he's able to really give folks that library worker perspective, which is great. While also showing the positive side of why it is that we do what we do, and I think that's very important, because I know there is a sort of wholesale ignorance of librarians and what libraries are for, and that's making a lot of these challenges even harder. And there are plenty of organizations that are doing what they can. So ALA, state organizations, Ease at Work, all of these groups are really trying to provide resources to avoid burnout. But I can't think of any that I would say are all that effective. I can't think of any that, like, my staff, are able to just turn to and be like, oh, that helped, I'm better now. It's the problems are too, I think, systemic. And I think it's going to require a national, systemic, cultural solution to really overcome a lot of this.
Matthew, Moni, anything you'd like to add to that?
I want to hear more stories like Kat's, where there's, more support at an administrative level. And that's something that I've called out for a long time. I know all of us have mentioned it too, is there's organizations, but if your administration is unresponsive or unsupportive, and it's not all are like that, but there's still way too many of those stories where, someone is in their office and doesn't come out, or whatever that looks like. And I think that would go a long way. And actually, even leading into the next thing we're talking about, AI, is like, how do we push back on the use? It starts with also, hopefully your admin is not forcing you to use tools like that. So sorry, getting ahead of ourselves, but
All good. Matthew, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think the systemic, like, it's a profession-wide kind of issue, and um, I always appreciate when people acknowledge the problem and our pro orgs acknowledge what's going on and try to do something. But unless that, for me, the situation is, unless that something is either a particular library no longer does 30% of what it does, or they get 30% more staff to cover that 30%, we're kind of in this rock and hard place where the funding and the staffing is the problem. And I always specify both, because increased funding often has nothing to do with increased staffing, at least in academic library settings, right? Like, I have an amazing budget, but I'm still a department of me. I can't have any additional staff. I can run out of things to buy with specific endowed funds, but I can't spend it on people, right? And so we've run up into that system challenge. I do want to throw out a pitch to Renewals LAS. It's Katrina Davis Kendrick. She's been doing this kind of like coaching and burnout wellness kind of stuff. Largely academics, I think, are paying attention to this, but um, might be something helpful for anyone on the call listening.
Well, sticking with the idea of the well-being of library professionals, but moving on to scope creep. Matthew, I'd like to turn back to you again. You have been an incredible advocate against the application of AI in the profession. What are your greatest concerns at this time? If we have time to know them all.
Right. You want one, you want a half a dozen, so I mean, from the perspective of like burnout and scope creep, right? I'm something I've this will be in part 2 of an article. Part 1 came out recently. I can drop it in the chat in a minute. There's a conversation some of us are having in college and research libraries about why we are not jumping on the AI train. And in part 2, one of my big focuses is on this idea that we can use generative AI tools to do our work more efficiently, and that'll either one, relieve some of the work burden, or two, free us up to do other things. Historically, like the trend with libraries and technology, that has never played out that way, right? The trend has always been we adopt this technology that theoretically helps us do some things more efficiently, and then what happens is we lose FTE, we lose staff, right? Like catalogers are almost an extinct group in our profession because over time we got more quote unquote efficient and centralized at cataloging, and then we just wiped out all of those FTE, not using that freed up staff time to do something else, just eliminating it altogether, right? And this is like I don't have the number in front of me. The article will have the number. There's this downward trend of like tens of thousands of lost librarian positions over the course of the last 20 years. So I'm picking on that one in particular here, both because we're talking about burnout and scope creep and do more with less, but that's where you're going to see admin advocating for it, right? They're going to advocate that it's an efficiency tool that will help you do your job faster. But what does that mean exactly? Like, why would I want to do my job faster? What's the after part of that? And that's the conversation that I have seen very few people in a like dean level position willing to have openly and honestly, right? So that's one big concern. I could give a million more, but like literally sustainability is in your pitch, and if sustainability is one of our core values, we can't really jump on board this technology that is burning down a forest every time you do something with it. Or an actual statistic is like every email you use ChatGPT for is like dumping a bottle of water on the ground, right? Like it's an absurd thing for an email, right? And honestly, if you send me an AI email, I don't want to read the email anyway. Just don't bother. But yeah, I could keep, but it's this existential thing, right? Like we've got all these problems. And I'll hush after this one. The last practical, immediate concern, I think, is this idea of we have to take on teaching people AI literacy and how to use this tech and how to interact with this tech. And I'm a little torn on it because that's one more additional expertise and area of knowledge and thing to offer that we're going to be asked to do without getting rid of anything else, right? And it also kind of, there's an implicit, like, we're okay with you using it if we start offering classes and one thing. What I said at a conference about a month ago was I asked everyone in the room who was it was a panel about AI. I was like, who in this room would openly offer a class at your library about how to use like the Pirate Bay or BitTorrent? And like not a single hand went up, but everyone is gung-ho to run with ChatGPT. So like I have questions. Sorry.
No, you have no apologies. Um, I just like to open it up to the panel. Do you have any thoughts on what Matthew noted with regard to concerns for the application of AI? And are there other elements of scope creep that you're seeing and are very concerned about?
Well,
We haven't-
I know
yeah.
oh, sorry, Kat, go ahead.
No. I was just saying in our public library, we haven't seen any of that yet, I will say.
AI in my position, which is collection development, has far from alleviated any work. It's created a lot more work because I have to now spend sometimes hours vetting our digital library for AI product, for AI created books, and because I can't rely on the vendors to do it. So that's been tricky and a bit of a challenge because these things are mostly crap and it's slop, and then when a patron checks it out, it reflects poorly upon the library. So it's like, well, why would you allow this? And it's like, I tried to stop it.
I just wanted to, I don't think that the environmental concerns get talked about enough, which Matthew did mention. And I don't know how many people, when I talk to kind of non-library, non-teacher folks, they're so excited about, oh, I have it do all kinds of small tasks for me. And that sounds great on paper, but I've been a college lecturer before. I know that like students, and they're busy. I'm not trying to like say that students are terrible people, but anytime that they have the opportunity to have a shortcut that they're allowed to use and won't get in trouble for, they will. And when you look at like why look at the ethics too of the companies that are pushing AI. When you think about where these sources are coming from, it's like the same five companies that run America and half the world. Why does like something like Google that is a tech company and already has, algorithms to bring you hopefully data when you're putting in a search query is going to come up with AI and then like it's going to come up with a summary of all AI, information and the links if you actually click on any of the links for the sources are terrible. My 12-year-old, she was like, I did a Google search and then, it gave me what I thought was an answer and I clicked on the link and none of the facts were correct and I just knew that from school. Like, it's and but people aren't taking that time to go down that path every time. They're just saying, "Oh, the top result said this. I need a quick answer." Boom, done. And so we're learning to like unlearn and that's really scary.
I want to continue on under the umbrella of well-being and talk about what was already touched on a bit at the top of our discussion. That's the safety of our library workers and the hostility that they face, not only from some patrons, but hostility to funding, hostility to all different elements of your work. Moni, we'll start with you this time. What kind of hostilities do you feel like you run into, and what pose the greatest challenges for you right now?
I feel like I'm just reliving trauma, but I will bring up one notable example since you mentioned hostility and funding, since it might be a little different than kind of just the war stories that all of us could tell. I was in at Escondido Library when the city who ran the library made the decision to outsource it to a for-profit private company. And that was incredibly because the community, it got a lot of publicity, a lot in the news, and the community was very against it, which sounds great. You would think they would support the library staff. Unfortunately, they did not know with whom to, there was no face to actually go complain to. And so they were coming into the library, and anytime a book wasn't available or a hold was too long, anything that would have normally annoyed a library patron had them screaming at us that we were just those workers from that company while we were in the process of a very public, like, will they, won't they, we're going to get a pink slip and we had to go sit down with HR and get our pink slip. Are we going to have a job after this? Do we want to have a job after this? What is the quality decline? And indeed it is. I will say, like, third party, if you already think it's bad, it's worse because you do lose a lot of the expertise. Generally, how it works is they will keep on the staff that they have, but once those folks start to move on, they will start having people with less and less education, less and less experience, so that they don't have to pay very much. And you can absolutely tell the difference in the quality that you're getting in service, unfortunately. So that's just kind of one example of loss of resources kind of being a safety issue too, because people were screaming at us and picketing and talking on social media anytime we'd post something nice about a story time. It was a crazy time.
Jack, you've cited safety and hostility towards library workers as a big issue for you as well. What would you like to add to that?
So my library is currently being targeted by so-called First Amendment auditors. And that's a trend that's been going around since the pandemic. And these are folks that come into the library and do their amateur evaluation of the collection or of the programs or of the displays and decide that there's not enough, and it's always more conservative views. And it's been rough because they want to film where they're not allowed to film. They want to film our patrons. They want to film children. They want to go back into our workspaces, erroneously claiming that they have a First Amendment right to do so because it's a public building, but it's a limited public forum, which is a whole legal jargony thing, which means that basically we can set rules, inside the building. And it's been incredibly hostile. It's been so hostile that we have to have special meetings and role-playing seminars and staff-wide training and a resource on our staff intranet specifically just for these types of patrons. And what an incredibly hostile work environment that is, to think that at any minute someone's going to come in and record you while you're just trying to do your job and try to incite you into a fight, into an argument, and then furthermore try to humiliate you online. It's been very, very difficult. I will give, though, my library, the director, the administration have done a great job of training the staff and trying to get them prepared and supporting, but that doesn't change the fact that it's awful. It's awful that we have to think that that's going to happen.
Absolutely. Katharine, anything that you'd like to add to them?
It wasn't necessarily a First Amendment type of person, but I was being filmed on camera with a very hostile patron who claimed that we didn't have the kinds of resources that he needed because his vision was terrible. And it was at night, so I was the only one in the department. And I had to write it up and report to our administrator. Luckily, there was a lot of support from her and from our county commission that oversees us, so that when this person did go to a county commission meeting and tried to say how terrible I was and how the library didn't have the resources to help him, they were able to answer him and say, but we are doing this and this and this. He hasn't come back since, and it's been over a year and a half now. But yeah, I've been on that receiving end. And it's very difficult to maintain your calm, when he's filming you and he's being hostile, to still remain calm and polite and just basically do my best to give him, some information so that he would then walk away. It took half an hour before he finally left. But like I said, as soon as I let my administration know, there was immediate support to make sure that everything was going to be okay. So yeah, they're everywhere. We don't have as many of the problems as Jack's library has. Thank goodness we don't. But we have had occasional people come in and try to say that they were going to audit our collection. And we said, you're welcome to go onto our catalog. You're welcome to look around in our public shelving, but we can't let you do anything else. And our director has backed us up on that.
I'm so glad to hear that many of you have had support from your leadership teams,
Mhm.
from your administration. Um, I do want to open it up as a reminder to our attendees. If you have any questions, if you have something that you'd like to share, you're absolutely welcome to do so. Please feel free to raise your hand, or if you'd like to shout something out, you're welcome to. Otherwise, if you're more comfortable, you're welcome to put it in the chat as well. Now I'd like to move on to budgetary concerns, obviously, which is something that is ever present for everyone. Um, I'd like to turn to Jack, to you first for this. How would you describe your budgetary concerns, given that they extend beyond the cuts themselves? They can include confusion around if and when cuts will happen, how they will affect certain aspects of libraries. What can you share with us?
So with public libraries, the staff is the biggest budget. That's always the biggest budget line. It's roughly 60% typically. And then usually the next biggest is materials, either building or materials. And our budgets here in Ohio are under threat. And they're under threat in a lot of states, but Ohio has been blessed for a long time with the public library fund, and we're one of the only libraries in the country that has that. So that's actually a certain percentage of the general revenue, tax revenue, is dedicated to being dispersed to the public libraries throughout the state. And we've always been able to rely on that, and that has helped keep the libraries strong. Unfortunately, now we have a Republican legislature that is trying to eliminate the PLF. And what's been exceptionally frustrating is that there has been a massive campaign to grassroots to contact, and they have received record-breaking phone calls and emails and from their constituents to legislators from their constituents to keep the PLF and keep it strong. But unfortunately, they've resorted to lying and simply saying to anyone who calls and complains, like, oh, yeah, we will, and we're going to increase it. So they're calling something the PLF that is no longer the PLF. They want it to become a budget line that they can then, that any governor can then just eliminate instead of having it actually be law. So that has been incredibly tricky because we don't know what's going to happen come July, because that's when the new budget could be taking place. So maybe by July, my materials budget gets decimated, but here I am ordering 3 months in advance. Or maybe this time we're safe and we're saved, but maybe 2 years from now, the next attempt, the next, right now we've got a governor who's actually likes libraries, but maybe the next governor won't. And then we'll still have this same Republican legislature that will just try again and not care that people are complaining. That level of job uncertainty is really frightening. Any library that does face significant cuts, almost all public libraries are going to try to cut staff last, but sometimes it's inevitable. In order to keep your service, you have to cut staff. And then sometimes that means that you end up outsourcing things like book processing and cataloging and everything else to a vendor, to a for-profit. And it's really frustrating. Frustrating is not the right word. It's honestly very frightening. It's very scary right now, because we're in this limbo state and we don't know what's going to happen. And that's this will segue into scope creep, but I'll go ahead and bring it up. We've had this tendency of scope creep to provide more and more and more and more and more, when really we should be asking as a society, like, why aren't we providing these services? Instead, we've just been relying upon the library to provide these services, and they're not services that libraries are not the best at providing. And no one wants to admit that, though. So libraries have taken this on in order to prove their relevance, to keep the funding. And here we're about to possibly lose the funding. And, are we going to then get stuck with like losing our core mission? Are we going to continue to provide free notary service, but, we're going to cut our book budget in half? It's endlessly tiring. It's exhausting.
Absolutely. Moni, anything that you'd like to add?
I don't know how aware folks are with how far behind libraries generally are in funding in the first place, in funding and in resource allocation. And so, I came from my first almost 10 years of working was in Parks and Recreation. And when I started working in the library, I fell in love with doing that. It was crazy to me that like the same types of programs that I had all the money to do in Parks and Recreation, I had to figure out what did we already have available in the library to make it work. And that was like the joke. And that my director had more education than the director of Parks and Recreation, but was making less money, and it's just, I've worked in places where the budget allocation for the police department is 80% of the entire city budget. And then also the cops would tell me that, sorry, but if you call, you're going to be last on our list for us to come help with anything. And so, I'm really concerned too when I see, California, I'm in California and we have the fifth largest economy in the world. And right now we have a fairly supportive governor. But I am concerned when I hear colleagues out here be like, well, we're in California, we'll be fine. Because part of this with taking away budget, IMLS, and other financial support for libraries means that, yeah, California could cover it. But when you're looking at the bigger picture of, 100 fires have been set, not even literal fires, although that too out here, 100 different things need support all of a sudden that have suddenly lost their funding and lost their resources. Is the library, every single aspect of the library that lost support, going to be the first thing on that list? Of course not. So I don't think that anyone can take for granted any resources that you already have and also think that you're not going to, unfortunately, lose more ground.
Katharine, I know that this was, of course, a concern for you as well. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, for us, so far, the last couple years have been pretty good. The county actually gave us more budget to actually hire a few more people in the library, but some of the ancillary funding, like IMLS, with those cuts, it is affecting our interlibrary loan. It is affecting our statewide Ask a Librarian service. We participate in that. We have a set time slot once a week for one of us on the staff to monitor the AAL, the Ask a Librarian site, to see if there are any questions that have come up that need to be answered. Just this week, they had to cut the hours. They had to do only Monday through Friday, and only the daytime hours up until like 5 p.m. And a lot of people that I remember, from my times being on the AAL duty, we had questions that were coming in all hours of the night, weekends, and up until this last week, we had evening hours until 10 p.m. We had weekend hours, Saturdays and Sundays, all day until 7 p.m. And now we don't have them at all. And I know that is affecting things, in that we have people out there who have questions who don't have any way to get to a library to answer them when they need them. That is more of a statewide thing, but it is affecting us locally. Our director is really monitoring everything very, very closely in terms of, what kind of budgetary concerns might be coming up in our county and how that would affect us. But so far, we have not seen the problems that a lot of library systems throughout Florida and the rest of the country have been experiencing, at least not yet. We are basically mostly locally funded through our county. And so far, the county commissioners seem to be on our side, even though they're all Republican. They seem to kind of mostly understand that the library is a major asset in the community and that we are taking on a lot of stuff, that we have no homeless shelters. And so the library is a de facto everyday place. So they do know that we are helping them a lot more than most people in the public know. What our public are seeing is that they're not able to get those interlibrary loans that they wanted. And they kind of take it out on us, which is normal, natural, we're the people right there. And we are really trying our best to explain the situation. They don't understand. They don't really understand. And we try to help them as patiently and kindly as we can. But sometimes some of us have to just walk away from the desk and say, can someone else cover for right now? I need a few minutes. So yeah, we don't have it as bad as a lot of other places do, at least not yet. That's what we keep thinking in our heads.
Well, this next point, Matthew, I'm taking from the comments that you added in the chat in terms of the weaponization of having to prove your relevance in the profession, in the industry. And given that you work with the library professionals of tomorrow, you are educating folks who are entering the profession. What is the conversation being had right now? What are the concerns being raised? What does that look like for the next generation of library workers?
Yeah, it's so I'm lucky that my class, people are going to roll their eyes, but like my class discussions are often very valuable and fruitful. Everyone hates Canvas conversations, but they're they're as best as they can be asynchronously, right? But I also try to just be really honest with my students and be like, this is what's going on right now. People who have been through library school on this, that are listening to this, will understand that, our favorite faculty were probably the ones who are currently working in libraries rather than folks who are not, because we always bring in what's going on. But the conversations are largely concerns about if there'll be a job tomorrow, right? A lot of my students, so I teach at the University of Kentucky, but it's a remote program, and we have people from all across the country. And there's a lot of conversation about, are you willing to move for a job? Where are you willing to move? Where are you not willing to move? Thinking about place and location, geographic situation has always been important for libraries, right? Because public libraries are almost entirely locally funded, as Katharine mentioned. And then, there's the state level, if you're lucky, like Ohio. And then the federal level. If the federal part is going to fall apart, we're going to see states with less wealth have a higher hit from that federal funding disappear. We're going to see those. We're going to start seeing even more of those library director job postings where the pay is $15 an hour, because you'll get rural communities who A, don't understand, and B, no longer can afford anything else, and or are unwilling to front it themselves entirely, right? Like their value calculation has changed. And I think that's really something we're up against is, traditionally libraries were in a good thing on both sides of every political aisle, right? For different reasons, right? The right tends to value libraries when we attach ourselves to, we're good for local business and entrepreneurs and for career training, right? The left side is usually more ideologically in favor of resources that are freely available to everyone, regardless of who you are. And that line has it's usually worked out. And now we're in a position where that's not necessarily the case anymore. Um, some of the numbers that every library have been seeing in like polling data are frightening. And I think that just all feeds into this, like, we have to prove our worth and stay relevant and stay valuable thing. The key for me for that always is, at what point are we trying to prove the value of libraries by doing not library things, right? Eventually, it's no longer librarianship, right? Like, our core functions have to be our focus and we have to maintain them. If you give up on your core functions, then you're no longer a library. So let's like so that's future student stuff, right? Like, I'm drilling down on the core value, trying to prepare them for. I usually am teaching future academic librarians or library use people who are entering comics library world. That's more fun. But the future academic side is a lot of preparing students for the realities of working in higher education. If uh, I was a first gen student, so it's a little stronger on the first gen side, but most college students have no idea how higher ed works. About half of my students every year have no idea that I'm an adjunct and that I'm not actually a full faculty and am paid differently, right? Being upfront and honest about that, even at a grad school level, is eye-opening, and it encourages them to learn about where they're planning to work and how the structure is set up. Because only about 45% of academic library jobs are faculty now, and that number is diminishing over time, and a lot of those don't have tenure anyway. But governance by most universities is by faculty. So if you're operating at a staff level, what's your relative power level, and thinking about what you can and cannot influence policy-wise is the kind of stuff we're talking a lot about. And AI and information literacy and all the basics, right? I always try to force in some collection development work because, much like metadata and cataloging, collection development is not a required thing in library science education anymore. So you got to kind of get it in where you can.
Jack and Moni, I'd like to turn to you about what the conversations are for today's library workers, with your colleagues, with friends. What conversations are being had? Do you feel like you are witnessing folks leaving the profession for other careers? What is your experience? Jack, we'll start with you.
I have definitely seen folks leaving. It's been, just reference to something that Matthew mentioned of doing a lot of work that's no longer really library work. I've seen colleagues who just got burnt out spending the vast bulk of their time doing passports and notary stuff and faxing and all these things that they don't teach you in library school, and it's that's not why they got into this. Now some people got into this just for public service, and good on them. They're happy with whatever. But I have seen a lot of colleagues leaving. I've also just seen a lot of colleagues who are just really afraid of the political environment that we're in. And a lot of folks are just like, look, we're suffering from the same wage stagnation as everybody else. So I'm not making more money, but my stress level is being added not only to the position itself, but just existential stress level of, am I going to be harmed in some way in being in this job? And maybe it is physical harm. That is a possibility. But, harm could also just be being doxxed, being verbally assaulted, being called a groomer, having your reputation, spread in a negative way. And all you wanted to do was serve the public. It's very disheartening. So I understand why a lot of people are leaving and why a lot of people are questioning what they're even still doing.
Moni, what about you?
There has been a lot more interest in just like what other types of jobs there are outside of traditional library work. Like I, for instance, now am working for a company and I'm still the librarian at the company. It's a library vendor. And I get a lot of questions just about like, what was that transition like? And yeah, seeing a lot of great folks leaving. Also back to an era, when I first started, we had just come out of yet another recession. And there were a lot of folks that actually I was one of them having to work like multiple part-time library jobs because, a lot of these cities or different places didn't have the kind of money to be able to like do the full benefits and all of those things. And I'm seeing a lot of that too, where I have a lot of friends that have like 3 part-time gigs, nights, evenings, weekends, just kind of doing library front end work. So I think just a lot of exploration on what other things that the degree could potentially have prepared us for has been something that I'm seeing. And yeah, that's really kind of all that I could really add beyond what Jack said.
Well, again, I just want to pause for a moment for our attendees. Does anyone have any questions, any concerns that they would like to raise to our panelists? Okay, we'll go ahead and continue on. The last segment that I would like to raise is the discussion of book bans, censorship overall. We are in a new era of censorship. These things have evolved over time. Depending on your location, the volume and tenacity of those calls for censorship may vary. What should every library professional know about how to approach calls for censorship? Moni, why don't we start with you?
It's always a how quick can you get off mute? So it's been interesting, and I'm now in a much better position to be able to kind of like speak about these things because I'm not, in a traditional library setting to be targeted. I have been doxxed in the past and all of that kind of thing. But so, some important things to know. And I've been working to that end. I've been working with like CBLDF and some comic book attorneys and people to kind of look at, bans and challenges, not just to comics, but across the board. One thing that CBLDF is mentioning now is that we're kind of not even in censorship anymore. We're just straight out bans. And that's being supported more and more politically. That's being supported more and more by like laws and bills that are being passed. And policies is to where, someone says, we don't like this book, it's got to go because the consequences are more dire and the scrutiny is greater. So that's one thing that we're seeing. I will say something positive, though, is one thing that I've seen since I've been working with these other organizations. I've been doing panels in front of kind of not just other librarians and things, and those, general attendees basically at like comics conventions, and more people are attending those, and more people are asking, what can we do to help? And writing it down and really kind of coming up and following up. So, it's hard to say because we've been screaming this for a few years, since 2020 at the very least, that this support was needed and this attention was needed. But it does feel like we're starting to kind of get that growing finally now.
Katharine, we were chatting off air about some of the guidelines, the guardrails that are in place at your branch. Would you mind talking about those?
Yeah. Our director has been very proactive about dealing with the possibility of challenges because we have had a number of them. So we actually do training where we do role playing. And she uses some of the actual questions and challenges that people have made to our library. And one staff person will receive that question to ask, and then another staffer is supposed to try to answer, and then the director will step in and say, well, this is a situation and this is how we handled it. We also have a very strong policy, a written policy that we have on our website that the county commission has actually approved. It's a major thing that we got them to approve it. And so that if someone persists in saying that they want a book removed, we will tell them they're welcome to fill out the paperwork. And we also say it's one book title per challenge form. So they can't list 20, 30, 50 books on one challenge form. They have to only focus on one title, and they have to note down if they have read any part of that book. And then we get a committee together, and it'll always have a line librarian who works for the public, an administrator, and someone from the county commission who would go through that challenge form and discuss the situation and give an answer. I don't think we've removed anything in the 5.5 years I've been working for Bay County Public Library. We have not had any books actually removed. We have defended them, including genderqueer. And what's great is that the policy also states if a book has been challenged, but the decision has been made to retain it on the shelves, no one else may challenge that book for at least 1 calendar year after. So that has helped a lot. And just having that kind of support helps the staff when we are dealing with those people who are coming in and questioning certain things, knowing that we do have that support, that we have gone through that training, we have an idea of how to respond to these people and maintain our own cool, and that there are steps and policies that must be followed, and that our county commission does back us up on this. That has really helped us enormously. As I've said, we have not had to actually remove anything, to my knowledge, in the time that I've been working there. And we've had a number of challenges, and mostly against graphic novels.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that you have those guardrails in place. Jack, I want to turn to you because you have done a tremendous amount of work with Unite Against Book Bans for the book resume program. Would you mind telling folks if they're unfamiliar about the program and how it can offer support?
Yes. Forgive me for just a second. I'm going to actually get that web address and put it into the comments. But the United Against Book Bans is an organization that also falls under the Office of Intellectual Freedom, which is itself an organization that falls under the ALA. And what happens when someone challenges a book, as Kat was describing, you have a request for reconsideration form or something similar. You have a process, or at least there should be. And in that process, typically a committee like the one that Kat referenced will have to uncover information regarding that book in order to justify that book's place in the library, and in order to explain how that book does fit the collection development policy, which again, the library should have, book resumes. And so the book resumes were designed, I was part of the working group that helped launch these. And we had, when I finished with the working group, I believe it was 49 publishers. I believe it is a lot more now. And what it is these documents provide that information for you. So if you are in a library and a book gets challenged, you can hop on to book resumes and bring that book up, as long as it's one of the selections, and it likely is. And it will have that crucial information for you. It'll have accolades, it will have subject matter, it will have basically the reason why you should or maybe should not have these books on your shelf or in a certain age group's shelving. These were just designed to save time, to save labor. And it's not just library folks that can use these. It's also parents can use these. It's also teachers can use these. It's a resource for everyone because, one thing I would we really need the public to be more involved in the book challenge issue, in the book ban issue. And this is one way, I mean, you yourself, if you're a parent, you can, or just a patron, you don't have to be a parent. Just a patron who's concerned about book bans, you can hop in here if you learn about a book ban and defend the book yourself. Show up to the board meeting and say, like, look, this book has these are the reviews for this book. It's incredible. Why would you want to get rid of it? It's about this. And From what I've heard, these have been a big help to a lot of people. That would be, and I hope that they continue to help, and I hope that publishers continue to participate.
Matthew, do you experience any issues with book bans, censorship, at the academic level, or are these experiences that you've shared?
We don't really have challenges to material at a medical school level so much. Like, yeah, it's we have had to think thoughtfully about the appropriate place for some materials, right? Not the kinds of things that we're generally seeing publicly challenged, though, right? Like we have collections dating back centuries at Harvard, and do we really want race science to be prominently displayed on the shelf or stumbled across on the shelf next to, actual vetted science, right? So we think about those kinds of things. Traditionally, we've been moving that kind of material to offsite storage, right? It's still owned by us. It's still there for researchers who are working on that. The history of medicine and science, you can't eliminate it from that's, it happened. So we maintain it, but then we think more thoughtfully about like what should actually have a space that someone might stumble across on the shelf. And, our archives and museums folks here have to think about like appropriate storage and display or not display of human remains. So we have those kinds of concerns, but no one's really coming into Harvard and saying, why do you have genderqueer on the shelf? How dare you? I was, yeah, that's more of a, me personally, I get targeted for stuff constantly, but it has nothing to do with like, my day-to-day work. It's more my professional outreach, like constantly advocating for comics and library spaces. And I've attracted my own like personal ceaseless stalker who constantly tries to convince Harvard that I should be fired. And it's great and fun and not at all terrible. um but like so, right. But I mean it's a real risk. Like if you put yourself out there, like people will come for you even for like professional outreach, and they will try to weaponize the idea that you think kids have a right to read against you because that's apparently blasphemous to some people. So it's, yeah, I deal with that kind of thing, not specifically. I don't have to have a committee challenge policy in place at a medical school level.
Well, I want to say thank you to Cassie for posing some really great questions in the chat that I'd like to share with you. First and foremost, what keeps you in the library profession and what are you doing for self-care? Is there anyone that would like to tackle this question first? Yes.
I've been a librarian for over 40 years. I just turned 70 years old. I'm still working. I'm crazy, right? And I've worked in a lot of different areas, mostly as a public librarian, but I've been a school librarian in a private, Catholic school. I have worked as a selector for a book vendor for libraries. I'm back in the public library. For me, it's a calling, and I have found my community in libraries. And see, my husband is a retired pastor, so he had a call. I feel like being a librarian, that is my call for what I do. And I have been doing it for a very, very long time. I don't want to stop as long as my mind is sharp enough and I'm physically capable of doing things because of basically the community of librarians online and in person in my current library. We have a very strong sense of camaraderie. We support each other emotionally and personally. And it's, and we, We all work together, whether it's circulation staff or the technical services staff. We actually do on-site cataloging still. And it doesn't matter what particular job duty we have in that library, we are all working together. And it's just that whole strong sense of community and doing what we want to do to help people, whether it's finding books, helping them on the computer. We do notary services as well. But all of it is serving the public as best we can and helping each other through the tough times. That's what I'm seeing. And I treasure that. That helps keep me strong mentally and emotionally. And I intend to keep working as long as I'm physically and mentally capable of doing so. I just love it.
And Katharine, before we move on to one of our other panelists, what provides you with hope, whether within the profession or outside of the profession, and what types of things are you doing for self-care?
My hope, what I see as hope is the younger people who are coming in. We have a brand new librarian who moved down here from Minnesota of all places. And just to see that we still have young people who want to be in the profession. We have a couple of retired teachers who joined the library staff in the last couple of months. They didn't want to get away from working and helping people and decided the public library was a good place, and it is. To have my own son working in the library in a different department, that is encouraging to me as well. So this is just seeing that a lot of different people who are coming in, who are still wanting to work in the library, and we're all, working together and having that. As for self-care, one of the things I was actually able to turn into an ongoing program. I have been folding origami since I was 8 years old. My Japanese grandmother taught me, and I have been doing it ever since. And I do a monthly virtual origami program. And it's just folding the art, just having to concentrate on those folds. You kind of clear your mind a bit. It's almost like meditation, but your hands are making something. And so that, I think, helps me a lot. And also reading all kinds of graphic novels, graphic nonfiction, like I said, all kinds, from everything from superheroes to my very favorite Usagi Yojimbo to ripple effects to everything else out there. Just having that to help me relax and just kind of get lost in the art and the words and everything. That is something comics have always given me. I've been reading comics since I was 4 years old. So that's how I learned. Yes. So those things help me a lot to calm myself and keep me going.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that, Katharine. Jack, I'd like to turn to you. What keeps you in the profession? What gives you hope, whether in the profession or outside?
Serving the greater good. That's what makes this so rewarding, even when it's challenging, is just knowing that I'm on the right side and knowing that I'm doing what's right, and that providing people with access to information, and we can define information as broadly as we want. That can be actual, educational information, that can just be entertainment, that can just be a space to access the information peacefully. Just connecting people to things that will enrich and reward them in some way is very fulfilling. And so I know that it's worth it. I know that it's worth the fight and it's worth the struggle. But I guess what gives me hope is just sometimes I see when the average person, I feel like a lot of this stuff is going down due to just apathy or ignorance, like that just people just don't know that it's happening. And I think what gives me hope is knowing that most Americans are not on board with what's happening to libraries, like at all. Most Americans support libraries and would not approve of these methods, whether it's the patrons coming in and doxing or First Amendment audits, or if it's the legislation of actual book bans. That's another fun thing that we're facing in Ohio, is that attached to this budget, to strip our budget, is a legislation to turn us into, I think it was Idaho, basically, where all content that has any LGBT or gender affirming gender content whatsoever, which is so broad and vague, is automatically adult content. So that'll be fun if that were to pass. How I would survive in libraries if that were to pass and I had to literally remove that stuff either from the building or into its own adults only section is impossible. I don't know how I would do it. I don't know if I could survive in librarianship if that were to happen, but I just hope that on the other side of this are folks who will kind of, like the general public, will sort of wake up and see what's happening before it's too late. And I just hope that it's not already too late.
Moni, what about you?
Yeah, all the things that they have both said, I definitely, have found kind of my people here and having that camaraderie. I've also just, I've had to ask that question even before this moment, just because I have spectacularly lost my last couple of library jobs and had to ask that question, like, do I want to go back in and do this again? And the answer has always been like, this sounds more negative than I mean it to be. Like, I was watching oh my God, that I just forgot the name of it, but that medical drama where that takes place hour by hour.
Oh, The Pit.
The Pit, thank you. I was gonna say The Purge, but that was definitely not the same thing. But where they show the incredible burnout and trauma, and I'm not at all like comparing the two professions, except for that, like, these are folks who they're calling, like Kat was saying, this is their calling. And who else also is going to do it if not us? We're already trained. We already, are ready to go. And we do love it. And for me, my career has always been kind of leaning into doing more of what I like. I mean, everybody's avoidance of pain, right? And you go towards pleasure. But every time I've leaned into like, hey, people really, the adults really liked it when we gave them their own comic book section. Hey, the adults really liked it when we gave them their own comic book club. Like, keep on leaning into those things. And now, I'm in a position where I get paid to read comics. Contrary to popular belief, for the most part, librarians are not allowed to just sit and read all day as much as they'd love to, at least like not in their job capacity. And my job is to read comics. And, so that's been fun. And I guess as far as like self-care is really just reading the comics and getting to be also kind of a champion for creator folks and industry folks, and really becoming friends with these people and being, and I don't mean champion, like being a cheerleader for their projects and helping other people discover them, whether that's through the library or whether that's, on social media. So that's something, I don't know if that's really self-care because it's not relaxing, but it is definitely fun, exciting, and rewarding, and has brought me just amazing people into my life.
Matthew, what about you?
Yeah, so staying in the profession, I have two answers for that. One of them is only slightly sarcastic, but it's true. It's the, I have a master's degree worth of debt keeping me in the profession, right? Student debt disappears, and my whole perspective may change on whether I stay or not, right? Like, I'm here because, I have a financial obligation to be here. But I do also, right, like this is practical and real. But I do like I find, Moni and I talked about this recently. Like I get joy out of the parts of my job where I get to connect people to stories, where I get to encourage people to be creative, right? Like the medical part, I kind of fell into that part of librarianship, and I have found ways to make it more about humanity and storytelling and experience rather than hard science, right? The hard science matters. You want your doctor to know biology, but you also want them to remember that you're a human being, right? And so that's what keeps me going is I'm fighting that kind of, battle inside the library where if I throw enough storytelling options at my students, something will get through, right? We've got comics, we've got kids books, we've got a short story dispenser, we do zines, we anything I can think of, I get the go ahead and do and make it work, right? So that's keeping me going and happy in the job, right? Was the other part self-care?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I don't, it's not always relaxing, but wrestling, what being a wrestling fan is self-care. Uh, WrestleMania was okay this year, but being a wrestling fan is self-care. But the problem with the people on this call in particular, right? We turn our hobbies and the things that we enjoy doing into our job, and then it becomes this weird tangled mess. And wrestling is part of this too, because I'm doing a wrestling comics library panel at ALA. So my job already ate comics. Now I'm gonna feed it wrestling too, I guess. So it's just all a big circle.
Oh, goodness. I want to take a moment to note that Hillary Chang has joined us. Hillary was one of our featured panelists. Hillary, I don't know if you are in a place to speak. It's totally okay if you are not. But I wanted to make sure, since you were able to join us, to offer a moment to share what keeps you, hello, there you are, to note what keeps you in the profession and where you find joy.
Oh gosh. Okay. Well, first off, I really liked all of your answers. Your answers was actually really, really good. I think it was Jack who said that, right? You know what you're doing is worth it, and that really is part of it too. What keeps me going. Also, I sort of have to say that um, I have the best staff on the planet. I really do. And when I say that, because we are really a team. And I think that's one of my proud moments of, when I became a branch manager, is that we turned into like a team. And sometimes it's very much, us versus them. And you know who's on your team and you know who's not. And I'm not just saying my staff, it's a lot of patrons too. Our patrons who are regulars who have actually been coming to my branch longer than I have, and I've been here for, gosh, 20 years. Um, but it's things like that. Joy, it's just, you just have to notice what is happening around and choose to notice the good things. Obviously the bad things are there, but really, um, uh, celebrate the good things too. It was really funny because there's this patron and she's a regular and she was trying to print out something and she was having an issue. And so I said, okay, you know what, we'll do this. And we printed it out. And as it was coming out, I went, yes. And she looked at me and I said, no, you have to celebrate all victories. And we got this to print. And so, and it's just, anything small, anything big, yeah, we celebrate it. And that's where I do find a lot of my joy.
Thank you for that, Hillary. I have one more question that I'd like to pose, but I again wanted to open it up to our audience. Are there any questions from our attendees or for our panel? Are there any questions that you feel like I haven't posed or topics that you'd like to tackle? Yes. Sarah, you raised your hand.
Yes, hi. I I kind of this might be more directed towards Catherine. It seems I work in a small, semi-rural, affluent public library in Massachusetts. And so we seem to be in a similar situation where we have like a lot of great support from the local and the state government, and from our patrons in terms of, like funding the libraries and book bans and all these issues that are coming up. But so I think we've gotten very comfortable in the sense of we're not, in danger of cuts or these existential things. So, but it's really great to hear all of these experiences from across the country. Just how do we take those and I guess implement new policies, or what can we do to prepare for the worst, if something were to happen in our town, in our state, in the best possible way.
Well, as I said, for us, our director has really basically been leading us with the role-playing scenarios, with just keeping us all aware of everything that's going on out there in terms of, what's happening, because not all the library staff are professionals. We have a lot of library assistants, but just to make sure that everyone is on board, we have monthly staff meetings, and she will go over, things that are happening. Like I said, she's always going to talk with the county commissioners, and just continuing to work with them to make sure that we always have that support, so that we can, continue to do what we do. We have a very, very, very strong policies in place, and we review them at least every other year, if not more often, to make sure that we still have everything up to date, and that our policies are still relevant to the things that are happening, out there, and just also keeping aware. We are both members of our state organization, and we are both members of the Intellectual Freedom Committee of the Florida Library Association. And so she really helps everyone, keep on top of things that are going on around the state and in the nation, so that we are prepared for things that could happen. So basically, it's for us, we just have a very good, strong administration that works both with us, with the public, and then also works with the politicians in our county to make sure that we're all working together to make the library the best possible place that we can be to help the community.
Thank you for that response, Catherine. And Sarah, thank you for your question. Excellent. Any other questions from our attendees? Wonderful. Well, Matthew, I see that you have shared the What to Do When a Challenge Comes Through checklist from the ALA's Graphic Novel and Comics Roundtable. So that is available in the chat. So please feel free to access that. And I just wanted to offer a really big thank you to all of you, not only to our featured panelists, but all of our attendees. The work that you do is tremendous. You are seen and valued and appreciated. I hope that you know that even in the most dire of times, it can feel as though you're losing hope, and I empathize with that. But I think that this conversation is evidence of the fact that you are so appreciated, and your experience, your expertise is valued. For our featured panelists, Hillary included, if folks have additional questions, if they'd like to find you on social media or reach out to you with questions, what is the best way to reach you? Moni, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I'm on most social media platforms, some begrudgingly. I'm usually at Moni Bear, MoniBarre. So that's probably just the easiest, most direct way to remember how to find me if you'd like to.
Jack, what about you?
I am Comics Librarian on most social media platforms, with the caveat that meta platforms I'm not checking very often. The most reliable way to reach me through social media would be Blue Sky. I'm spending a lot of time on there. And I also have a website with an email function where folks can reach out to me, and that's just jackphoenix.com.
Matthew, what about you?
Yeah, so like 2 years ago, I would have said find me on Twitter, but not so much anymore. Pretty much I live on Blue Sky now instead. You can find me on Instagram or Facebook too if you really want to, but Blue Sky's best. I'm at Know the Matt. It's NOE the Matt. Or you can always email me. If you Google my name, you're like 99% chance gonna get me as the first result on Google. Or you can email the contacts form on graphicmedicine.org, and that gets to me as well.
Katharine, what about you?
I don't do a whole lot of social media except Facebook, and I'm even slowing down on that. But you could probably reach me best at my work email. It's kkan@nwrls.com.
Excellent. And Hillary, what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, I'm actually just on Facebook, but yeah, I haven't been there for a while though, unfortunately. But I put my email in the chat. It's just hillary.chang@librarieshawaii.org.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you again, everybody. You can find Fanbase Press on all of the social medias. Just search for Fanbase Press. I'm on there as well. And please feel free to reach out if you have additional questions. We try to provide as many resources as possible through interviews, through forums like this one, panels at conventions. So if there's something that you need, or if you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're happy to, if we can help directly ourselves, to direct you to someone who can. So, but again, a really big thank you to all of our featured panelists, all of you for attending, your wonderful questions. And again, thank you for all of the work that you do day in, day out. I hope you have a restful evening, and thank you again.